It's very easy for some anon on Twitter to throw out a comment and say, we've all been dumped on by market maker X. Right. And it's like, you've got like the level of like...
They've built billion-dollar businesses
and complexity
that price and manage risk across multiple regions and different protocol types, and like centralized, decentralized, and they do it in a way which...
To screw you up.
Literally, just to dump on your shitcoin. Welcome to episode 3 of The Local. This one's going to be slightly different. We're going to do a technical deep dive on some of the things that the industry faces in terms of pricing assets across different geographies and different protocols. Hopefully you like it, and we can talk for hours about this sort of stuff, and we'll try and keep it limited and on topic. It's going to be a bit more trader focused. And talk about something that we bump into as a market making firm.
Finally, my time to shine. We can talk technical.
And this is maybe a vanity trip for me because I like talking about like niche microstructure based issues. We'll try and keep it interesting and general. And
there's no whiteboard.
There's no whiteboard for me to jump down and talk
some
about
equations up there. Oh, that'd be real good.
That would be really good.
We should actually just turn this into a lecture series
or a maths pod.
Yeah.
And I think that there's maybe some use there in that the narrative, particularly in crypto Twitter, around market makers getting slammed is prevalent, particularly at the moment. And this is a soft pushback into things. So what we do is actually quite hard from a technical perspective and a technology perspective. And there are businesses out there that do it really well. And have been doing it for a lot longer than us. But maybe we can explore some of the things that are hard about it. And there's a myriad. Right?
It is hard.
And so for me, the most obvious one and the easiest route into this type of conversation is to talk about the fact that, and this is, this carries over to or from a lot of traditional finance asset classes as well. But crypto is geographically spread across the whole world.
Yeah, there's no colo, right?
Right.
So, I mean, and forgive me if you already know this, but essentially the matching engines, so where the actual trades, the orders...
So the computers the
actual computer where the actual, like... orders live, and if two orders cross where the actual trade occurs, generally live inside cloud infrastructure in different AWS.
And how's that different to what happens in other?
Well, in TradFi, of course, yes, there is still a server and a computer where the actual trade occurs, but that is in a rack somewhere, and you can pay the exchange and say, I want to run my code in the rack, and put me close and be co-located. And they have certain rules to make sure that it's fair and whatnot. I think one of them is actually a big coil of wire. Have you seen that?
This is the IEX innovation. Was like everyone's going to have a speed bump, which is the same length wire. So that no one can
advantaged.
Get their rack next to our rack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just to be clear, when people talk about a cloud data center, this is still actually a physical data center somewhere.
Of
course it is.
It's not in the cloud.
No, exactly.
It's a physical data center. There's not new.
So the game is the same.
The game is the same. It's still the same of like you need to run code close to the matching engine.
Right.
It's just that when it's co-located, they tell you where the matching engine is and where the racket's in, and you can pay them and to do that. Whereas to be close to it. Whereas when it's in AWS don't. Well. They don't tell you. You can determine some things about the data center and where it is.
That's the only difference. Like, it's literally if they just told everyone would be coloed in a similar to way that they are in traditional finance.
But you also can't, the way that the AWS's business model works, for example, you can do some cluster placement without getting too into the weeds.
This is a technical episode.
Yeah, well, you can find regions inside. So it works like this. So AWS will have a data center, say, Tokyo.
Yeah.
And inside Tokyo, they'll have 7 different availability zones, which are different areas. It could even be different data centers, but different areas of the data center.
And why do they do that? Is that for redundancy reasons?
If there's a fire, if there's a power cut, so you can run fault tolerance in your applications, which is obviously quite important.
Well, for them, it's part of their business, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Now, you don't have, then inside an availability zone, which you can select, which could be... in my mind, it's like a row of a set of racks.
Right.
You don't really have any choice where you are in there.
Okay.
And so that could be You could be the other end of the building.
So you deploy code, or a business deploys code. It runs somewhere in that
thing, and that availability zone also might be separated out. We don't know unless you can ring Jeff up and say, "Can I have a word, mate?" and tell me where it is.
I'll put it on the to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can play some games about. They give you some tools to be able to where you can place inside this thing. It's still random, but you can start to, if you found somewhere good, you could.
And the point there is that we know, because most of the time an exchange will tell us, or a venue will tell us, that their matching engine is running in this particular region.
It's usually on the exchange's documentation. Or a Telegram chat, you can use that.
And so a market-making business or a trader in general in crypto will want to be close to it for speed reasons.
Everybody knows that it's Binance AZ4 in Tokyo, for example.
Yeah. Tokyo region, AZ
availability zone.
Okay. And so they're in Tokyo.
But that's just Binance, right? And so the point is, we're talking about then. But then Bybit, for example, is in Singapore.
Okay.
And you have,
they're not the same place.
They're not. They're 35 milliseconds away.
Okay. Oh, nice measurement. A nice unit of measurement.
Yeah.
I was thinking miles or kilometers or something.
No. I think I'm an astronomer. I measure everything in time.
Okay, nice.
Is that how they do it, though, isn't it? It's all measured in time.
Yep.
I'm sure there's some comment about, you can use the speed of light. Actually, it is all just time in the end. But yeah, so there's a.
So not the same physical place.
Not the same physical place. The speed of light is a real, actual thing.
And they're
35 milliseconds, just to be clear, is several orders of magnitude longer than the internal time our code takes to make a decision about whether it's going to place an order or take somebody else's liquidity or cancel an order. That we do is measured in microseconds.
Yeah, and for context, and this is because of where we are and the businesses in general, there will be businesses that are way faster than that. And if you think about what TradFi does...
TradFi is another...
But how fast is TradFi now?
And TradFi is nanos.
And how do they do that, right? They do that through...
They've got application-specific integrated circuits.
Right.
I mean,
it doesn't even hit code.
It's gone beyond FPGAs now.
Yeah.
They are literally... In TradFi, they are literally designing the hardware itself and then printing a circuit board and baking the logic of, which can't be very sophisticated logic, but maybe if you have a few bits that are in a certain order, you might then
infer
decide
something.
Okay, I'm going to place an order there, or I'm going to take this trade there.
And so it's
we're 3 orders of magnitude slower than
from that.
Because of the very nature of the fact that this data is all served over the internet, because of this colo stuff, the first stuff we started talking about. So, which is a great leveler, by the way. This is why crypto, a firm like ours,
and everyone else who's competing with us.
Everyone else competes. But there are firms with orders of magnitude more capital expenditure than us, but we have a level playing field because of this internet.
And their infrastructure will be internally much more evolved. So they're what we call tick to trade. The time that it takes for processing will be a lot faster than us, but it doesn't really matter.
It matters in some ways. I mean,
when you're doing a lot of them, it adds up and it matters.
It also depends on what game you're playing.
Right.
You don't have to be the fastest.
Yep.
The longer time you have, the more sophisticated your reasoning can be about what's going on. Going back to TradFi, right? If you've only got 40 bits, 40 zeros and ones.
So little information.
How much information can you actually infer about the state of an order book that might have 1,000 levels?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. So the logic and the game that you can play is usually quite simplistic.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got much longer, if you had weeks to think about it, you could train a neural network on the state of the order book and find very, very interesting structure and all that kind of stuff. But that order book that would be pointless 6 weeks ago, right?
Oops.
So there's a trade-off, right? And so the more smarts that you add in terms of like sophistication around your taking logic or your placing logic, or just your trading logic, if you want to be specific, the more time you have, the more sophisticated you can be, up to a point.
Yeah, and so how does this 35 mils between Tokyo and Singapore play into that?
My point was going to be that so our internal, let's say, when we have a piece of data, say from Binance, how long we decide that we're going to do something is measured in microseconds.
Yeah.
But our application that's running in Bybit, because let's say we're trading...
It's 35 milliseconds.
Milliseconds away.
Which
it's
is
like 1,000 times more.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, which is quite a long time.
Yeah.
Relative. If
But
you
I mean, it's still a short amount of time.
it's a short amount of time, but if you zoom into the space of the application, it's actually quite a long.
Right.
Quite a lot.
But a human blink is...
I have no idea. 100 millis?
Yeah.
100,
That's what I said. 10 tenths of a second. Yeah.
It's faster than a blink.
Right.
But relative to the microseconds of
The internal.
our decision-making process,
slow.
it's 1,000
long amount of time.
Long time.
Yeah.
And you're trading the same thing.
Yes.
So you're trading these things that are, because you're trading, let's be simple, you're trading Bitcoin on Binance, you're trading Bitcoin on...
Pretty much fungible.
Yeah, okay, if they're perps, they might not be quite fungible. If you're trading the spot,
Yep.
literally fungible.
Same thing.
You could move them between the two
Yeah.
assets, same thing. And so...
And then these aren't just the only places. You then have locations...
You've got Coinbase in America,
Yeah.
in Virginia.
Trading the same asset.
Trading the same asset, right? And so that's 220 away.
And suddenly, so a market maker or a trader in general is trying to...
So one of the difficult things that we have. Let's just think about our understanding of what let's forget about trading for a second.
Yeah.
But our understanding of what is the price of Bitcoin right now.
Right. Or anyone in the industry's understanding.
Which is a system, which is a question that we want to interrogate our system about, because all these Bitcoin... Let's just forget about derivatives or any of that. We're just trading pure Bitcoin spot asset.
Yeah.
It's fungible. The Bitcoin I move from Binance is the Bitcoin I can put on Coinbase, is the Bitcoin I can put on Bybit. What's the price of that asset?
Well, the first thing I think of is there are at least two prices of it. There's the price I can buy it at, and there's the price I would be willing to sell it for.
Okay.
Right. So there's not a price.
Yeah. So let's talk about the price that you can buy it at.
Okay.
Okay.
And then how do I determine that? Well,
because you've got it trading on...
There's subtle
Binance.
things that come into it in terms of where do I have an account.
So let's just go between Binance, Bybit, and Coinbase.
Depends on where I'm trading. If I'm trading on one of those venues, then the price is what I can interact with.
But that's my point. But we will need to have the very nature of market making is you want to understand what the price of the asset is.
Yeah.
Agnostic of the venue in some sense, right?
Yep. Like the marginal...
The spot index,
yes,
we would call it.
The spot index.
Is what we would call it internally. And I'm sure that's probably the de facto.
So what's the market's view of the value of this thing?
Yeah, and so that's a non-trivial question when you have to relay that information across the globe.
Yeah.
And you have to, if you forget that in just the timeliness, just the fact that it might trade at different prices in different places. And I'm not talking about where it's arbitrageable.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about where it's 100k on Binance and 99k on Bybit, and therefore, okay, well, I'll buy that one and sell that one. I'm talking about where it's slightly different, but not going to beat the withdrawal fees or the spread or any this kind of
But
stuff.
even when it is arbitrageable, like you need to take in second levels of information. You might have 199, but there might only be like 0.01 of them at 100 and 10,000 of them at 99. And then is that piece of information actually that useful?
Yeah.
Because if you take it out, then it's suddenly 99.
Well, I'm talking about we've reduced the problem implicitly where we've reduced the higher dimensional structure of the order book, which is two-dimensional, and we were talking about price, which is one-dimensional.
Yes, yeah.
So
of course.
We have necessarily reduced a dimension
Which
there.
plays into my point of like doing this and what market makers in the industry do, and to some extent what traders do. Certainly algorithmic high-frequency traders within crypto and within TradFi as well. It's not easy.
It's not easy. And so one of the central things that we find hard, and that is an active area of research, and there is no answer to
continual evolution,
and continual evolution as there's evolution going on underneath you. Is how do we correctly discount the fact that the information that we're getting on Coinbase from Binance is 200 milliseconds old
when you receive it at Binance,
because they're all communicating.
And likewise when you're
and they're all communicating with each other, aren't they?
Yeah,
and so that's a problem that we work on. One of the key aspects of what we do as traders and quants and whatnot is we use a mathematical toolkit that we have available to us to try and answer that question. That question of like, well, okay, I know that the information's old, so I need to. We all implicitly as humans understand if it says old information, it might not be true now.
So you implicitly discount it.
It's still useful.
It's a piece of information that has relevance
if I got a newspaper from yesterday,
Yeah.
I still kind of know what's going on, but I might not have the latest, the full latest picture, right? So how do I inform my view of today when I haven't had today's newspaper?
Right.
Given what I knew yesterday, but given I've got a newspaper from France.
Yeah. What is the set of things that I believe might be possible given that I knew state?
Yeah. A new state of this time yesterday, and I've got the latest state from here.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting in Paris and that. So I've got my French newspaper, but I haven't got my newspaper from London yet. But I kind of knew what the newspaper from London said yesterday, and how do I then correctly formulate what my next move will be, and what we reach for I mean, not all trading firms do, but certainly in the space of high frequency trading and market making, what you reach for is your mathematical toolkit. And you say, okay, well, what is available? I've got information that's available to me, and I can try to admit I've got historic information, so I can backtest against what we've done, and I can come up with some model. And I might say, okay, well, actually, what's the most simple model? My simplest model is I'm going to assume that the price hasn't changed.
Right.
It's a reasonable starting assumption.
Or with no other information.
No, I've got no other information to go on. I'm going to assume that the price on Coinbase is the price on Coinbase. Okay, maybe you can do better than that, but and this is the start of the game that you start to play, where you start to think, well, actually, okay, how can I improve that? And that's just on the very, very simple question of what's the price of Bitcoin?
Right.
Okay. and that's before, getting to the difficulty. And this is when all these, Coinbase, Bybit, Binance, whatever, the ones I've been talking about, they're all largely the same, right? They're giving you the information in the same structure, more or less, an order book. How does that work for a Uniswap pool then?
So we've completely removed a whole portion of what goes on in crypto, which is the focus and the growth up in crypto trading in particular was on centralized exchanges, which were pretty much copy paste for TradFi limit order books.
Yeah.
But 2021, you had this evolution of AMMs.
Earlier than that. Was it 29?
What for
Uniswap?
Wow. Okay.
V1.
Yeah.
19, 20.
Right. And so with that innovation, you suddenly had the ability for swapping, effectively trading one asset for another, to occur in a completely different way.
Completely different mathematical practice.
You can make them comparable.
But
what does that mean in terms of location? Where do those trades happen, right?
Well, sort of nowhere and everywhere.
Okay.
So it's not quite the same, right? Because, of course, there is no centralized authority that goes, you have praised at this price and you have done this price. This is now KISS. That doesn't happen like that, right? Those trades are broadcast. So you are connected. You are connected to one node of many. And we can talk about the levels of decentralization available and whatnot. But because of course different protocols and different networks have different rules.
Different requirements.
So if it's Binance, there's 25 validators or whatever that you can connect to, and you connect to the one that your wallet's connected to or your piece of code is connected to, and you say, hey, that's what I do, and then that can be broadcast across the network. And so
this is information that's important in terms of you assessing what you believe the price of a Bitcoin is. So you've gone from a TradFi situation where all trading, particularly if it's a single venue, all trading occurs on one server in Slough somewhere. And you're like, okay, if I can get close to that, I know what the price. I know what the price of this asset is. And you go, okay, well, and this happens in TradFi, but certain assets are fungible and they trade in multiple locations. You go, okay, that's a lot more complexity. It involves networking, it involves discounting, it involves using our mathematical tools to try and introduce some indeterminacy and
because we don't
manage
know,
that.
Right?
We don't know, right?
That's that. We come up with the ideas of maths and physics and these kind of things to
deal with that
deal with the fact we don't know how this stuff works. We can't see the atoms that make this up, but we can model them. And we can kind of test whether that's true or not, right? And is our model correct? And so it's the same scientific process.
And so you've introduced this level of complexity which comes from
and then
the
decentralized takes into another level of complexity.
Right. Okay.
But as we're all gluttons for punishment,
we love this. I love this stuff.
We love this stuff, and so and you think about it in a slightly different way. Given the fact that there's no centralized matching engine, so you end up playing a slightly different game even just getting away from the pricing aspect of it.
Because timing is different.
Timing is different, and there's entirely different mechanisms by which one key difference between, if we just talk about Ethereum, for example, one key difference is that doesn't happen in a centralized matching engine. A centralized matching engine essentially 99% of them, it's a time priority.
Price time priority.
Price time priority.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but Ethereum's not, right? The block is constructed.
Gas priority.
Well, it kind of used to be when it was a proof of work, but now it's proof of stake, and we've got block builders, and we've got people who select from a pool of transactions and insert them. Depends on what your block builder's priority is.
Okay.
Right. And if
And
you're
their utility curve might be.
and the utility curve is not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for example, if you're got an in-house builder searcher, your priority might be, well, I'm going to give my priority is this guy's transactions, whether or not how much gas he bids or not. I'm going to include him as the first transaction. And because of the deterministic state-based change that occurs as you go through transactions in the block, which go to state was the state this, then it's the next state, it's the next state. It's not a time-based thing anymore, and so you have to factor that in as well particularly when you're trading as decentralized.
Doesn't that understanding what the correct sequencing across a block looks like come back to mathematical models though, in terms of what?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who would know a lot more about it than we do, but
it's another layer of complexity.
And it's a whole business in itself. Like you can see what block building has become.
Yep.
And that you can think of block building as a edge in changing the time priority algorithm.
Right.
Going away from that in terms of matching trades.
Okay, so we started at the idea that market making in crypto is not particularly complex free. It's like it has a lot of complexity within it. It comes with requirements like knowledge wise and technology wise that
I think it's a great intersection between networking, computing, statistics, and game theory.
Right. And so which
is why I think it's awesome.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And so when ABC market maker gets slammed by someone on crypto Twitter for dumping a token, and they're present on 80 odd venues, managing their risks really well. Maybe there's a sort of appreciation of what actually goes on.
Yeah, I feel like some market makers are really unfairly maligned. Because they happen to be household names, and I think they're actually doing. This is show how unbiased we are. I think they're doing probably a pretty good job, and they're doing a hard job. Then there's the market makers who are just doing crimes.
Yes, it's doing crimes.
That's like separate.
See episode previously.
Yeah. But so I think that these market makers,
and it's a hard technology lift.
It's very, very, very easy for some on Twitter to throw out a comment and say, "Oh, we've all been dumped on by market maker X," and it's like you've got like the level of like
they built billion-dollar businesses,
and complexity
that price and manage risk across multiple regions and different protocol types, and like centralized, decentralized, and they do it in a way which
to screw you over,
literally just to dump on your shitcoin.
Yeah. It's not quite the case.
Not happening.
Yeah. So I mean, we could we can maybe.
Thank you.
In a further episode, we can touch a little bit more onto some of these technicals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
a little bit more into it, but I think it's a good flavour of the kind of even just on the asking a very simple question: what's the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Going to the level of complexity.
Well, you saw me squirm as soon as you asked it. It's like, okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No worries.